Welcome back to RotoQL University. It's our MBA strategy course. We'll be looking at power forwards and center selection, the bigs. Sal, I know that you're excited about talking about this position. Um, what do you got to
Yeah.
say?
I'm excited to get to talk about a couple of my favorite players in the NBA, and I think this is obviously a very important position DFS wise too.
Cool. Let's get into it.
So again, we'll start with just the basic fundamentals, and then we'll kind of dive into some a little more advanced things. So again, we talked about how minutes are very important. You want to look at recent minutes definitely, and then obviously when players are injured, that will affect minutes a lot. Um, Usage rate is important. It depends on what type of player a person is. If he's a stretch four, which means he sticks out by the 3-point line a lot, you may want to focus on his usage more there because he's not going to get as many rebounds. Rebound rate is very important. Percentage of rebounds. Even if a player's not doing well, he'll put up a lot of rebounds, can kind of salvage a game, and then you'll have a lot of blocks from this position. Hassan Whiteside is on another level when it comes to block rates, even kind of putting the brow to shame. Blocks are very important. You can rack up a lot of fantasy points very, very quickly if your player gets a couple blocks, gets the rebound on it. Um, so this is why these positions can definitely put up a lot of points. Defense versus position, again, is important. I like to, again, group the power forward and center position together because rebounds will be a big factor in this, and power forwards and centers will kind of grab most of the boards. Defensive personal fouls, again, this is important. We want to make sure that our player can get to the line and isn't going to be fouled too much. Bigs put up the most fouls, and foul trouble will significantly reduce your minutes. So maybe you want to avoid a situation where a high usage player is going against, so like Andre Drummond against Boogie Cousins. They're going to probably foul each other a lot, and they're probably not going to play their full allotment of minutes. And that's something you definitely want to keep an eye out for. And again, when we
Sal,
always talk about, go ahead.
oh, go ahead. The stretch four, and also I guess there's the Porzingises, Channing Frys of the world. Are you tend to find those players, leaning towards those guys more so than the guys who rebound a lot? Maybe have a better chance for double double. Or is it more equal?
It's definitely equal. I tend to actually go for players that are going to get a lot of rebounds because you're less reliant on if they make their 6-3 attempts in the game, whereas they'll have 25, 30 chances, legitimate chances of grabbing a board. So you're going to have a lot more security there. Whereas the stretch four, if he misses 3 or 4 threes, it's going to be hard for him to hit the value. So that's definitely something you keep in mind. Obviously, players will kind of transcend both, but you'll definitely carry more risk with players that just tend to get a lot of threes and not as many rebounds.
Got it. Interesting.
So as we look at this, we can see that the number of points goes up a lot compared to shooting guard and small forwards. Power forwards and centers put up a lot of fantasy points. And this is definitely true on FanDuel because these positions won't have so many turnovers and will get a lot of boards. Um, you definitely want to make sure you have this here. And sometimes it makes sense to go cheap, especially when you have a backup center um, who may be very, very cheap and still is going to put up a lot of rebounds just because he's big and he'll be standing by the rim. So we want to focus on rebounds here and the double doubles. rebounds are worth 0.05 more on DraftKings. It's a pretty small difference, but it's definitely going to be noticeable if you play a lot. The player gets 12 rebounds. That's an extra 0.6 points, and there'll definitely be plenty of times where you lose by less than 0.6 points. Blocks are put up a lot of fantasy points. A player like Hassan Whiteside, who can average 4 blocks a game, that's an extra 8 points, and it's very, very substantial. So you definitely want to make sure you're pricing that in and kind of thinking about that when you're selecting your players. And the double-double, 1.5, is definitely something you want to keep in mind, especially on DraftKings. So if you look at the power forward position, you'll see that teams that are somewhat smaller side tend to play small. Will kind of be up there. The exception is the Sacramento Kings. They give up a lot of points to the power forward position, but that's something that you kind of changes a lot in just a weak defense overall. Rockets, 76ers, you have some bad big defenders there, and teams that like to play small, like the Celtics. And then you'll see teams that have a lot of good bigs. Obviously, the Jazz with the Stifle Tower, very good defensive team against the bigs, and you'll have Derek Favors, another great defender. Spurs are a team you almost always want to not play against, DFS wise. Pacers with some bigs, and the Heat. And you'll see teams with slower paces like the Heat aren't going to be good fantasy picks against. So we'll see some of the same names here in terms of positions. One thing we'll see is the Warriors will give up a decent amount of points to bigs, specifically centers, and that's a lot to do with them playing small. Again, 76ers are not a good defensive team in any stretch of your imagination. And Lakers too. And you'll see a general trend as teams that play poor defense generally will be bad almost against every position. But then you can look at some of the individual defenders to get an idea, and you'll kind of see those teams that are bad overall, but are especially bad defenders against the center. We'll definitely see a negative bump there. And again, teams that are on the bottom half, the Jazz, the Spurs, the Cavs, teams that play big, you'll definitely try to avoid picking players against those teams. So if you look at the average defensive rating correlation, you'll see that power forwards is pretty strong. Pace correlation is pretty good. Power forwards will generally be scoring more than centers, and centers will definitely proportionally have a lot more of their fantasy output tied to rebounds and blocks. And that's why you'll see that the correlations there are a lot less. But again, every team plays differently. Some teams will have 2 relatively big players. One will have a kind of a stretch 4. Some will play large stretches of the game without a center and kind of only a stretch 4. So you kind of definitely have to evaluate each situation differently. But one thing we'll definitely can take note is centers are less reliant on scoring as a source of fantasy points. And kind of the other stats, you'll see that correlation is definitely lower for that reason. So if you take a look, again, we'll see power forward usage is definitely correlated to value. This is in line with some of the other positions. You'll see that Anthony Davis is very, very good. This is obviously taken from the 2014-2015 season, so these things obviously change every year. And anybody that played DFS last year will know that Anthony Davis burned quite a few people, including myself, multiple times. Things like a Karl Anthony Towns, who kind of play both positions. Gorgie Deng. There's some good players out there that have a high usage and cannot pick up a lot of the other stats. Um, Again, centers, you'll see that this is definitely kind of not as clear a trend in terms of value versus usage. Boogie, obviously, he's my favorite player, and you can see his usage is by far the highest out of any centers out there. His value is definitely dependent on how many minutes he gets to play. He'll definitely pick up a lot of turnovers, and that's what you'll see in the 9-cat scores. But in terms of DFS scores, he'll definitely be the highest average per game this year, and someone I think is a great fantasy play. Hassan Whiteside, who has a relatively low usage, but is going to be in the top of the league in blocks and definitely in the top 5 in terms of rebounds. So he can be a very good play even if he gets 8 real points and can even put up 40 plus DFS points. Players like Brook Lopez and Vooch can be very good players. They have a high usage. And then you'll see a lot of players that can be pretty decent but have a very, very low usage because they get most of their points from getting boards and blocks. A player like an Andrew Bogut can definitely be a very good DFS player. If he puts up 10 boards, 5 assists, 4 blocks, he doesn't have to put up as many real points. And you'll see that that's definitely the case in the center position compared to any of the others. So if you take a look at some of the top Z scores, we'll definitely see that the Atlanta players are pretty good here. Obviously, Horford is moving on. Anthony Davis is very good. Draymond Green puts up a lot of value. You'll kind of see that there's a lot of depth in this position compared to some of the others. Point guards are very deep, but bigs are very deep too in NBA. You won't see as many traditional bigs as maybe we saw 10 years ago, but players that put up a lot of boards, can put up a lot of points, there are definitely quite a few of them. Yeah, and then if you look at centers, you can see that a lot of well-rounded players are up in the top. Millsap, who obviously we can see from the Z scores, is an elite defender. His steals and blocks are very, very high. Very good rebounder. So all these players, Karl Anthony Towns, Hassan Whiteside, they're very, very good at picking up stats that aren't just points. That can lead to some huge fantasy scores. A player like DeAndre Jordan, who doesn't even put up that many points, can be a very good player when he gets 15 plus boards and puts up a few blocks. He doesn't need to put up a monster scoring night to be great. You'll definitely see that's the trend from these positions in terms of the top players. So here, obviously, I love bigs and picked four bigs. Draymond Green, again, something we've talked about a lot. He doesn't need to put up a lot of actual points to be a good pick. 15 points, but he still had a monster game, got close to triple-double, put up the defensive stats. Julius Randle, another high-usage guy, high-rebound guy. Brook Lopez is a good scorer, and then you can see that we're targeting the teams that are weak against the bigs. The Nets and the Lakers both were up near the top in terms of bad defensive position, and these both put up pretty good scores. And then Alex Len, someone who has very good rebound rate and is playing a lot of minutes for big. Something that we really want to target is players when there's not a lot of big depth. So when the players are injured, bigs are definitely going to benefit a lot. Same with point guards. So that's situations we definitely can find good value. So again, visit our Zendesk to get better at using RotoQL. QL Wire has some great content, and all of the videos at RotoQL can help you become a better DFS player.